Chapter 52. An absolutely brilliant June day, crisp and redolent, just enough breeze to charge the air, but not so much to demand a jacket. And something about the light, the sheer delight and pleasure of it high above the valley and the city, high above highways and huge slow rivers, electrified somehow with the glint of glaciers and the ripple of snowmelt, aware of bears and elk and cougars and eagles, brought lips and fingers and noses and beaks and paws closer together, so that as Dave's mom and dad sat on the porch ostensibly having a family budget meeting at which Dave's dad was going to propose jocularly that they put Dave up for sale and pour the proceeds into Maria's education, they instead kissed gently, each surprised by the other, each startled and moved by the sudden quiet charge of the moment. And Dave and Cadence, running uphill along the river, more than occasionally jostled shoulders ostensibly at narrow points in the path, but not always. And Marten and his companion were also sprinting through the canopy above Dave and Cadence for reasons they could not have articulated, and occasionally they too jostled seemingly by accident, but not. And there is Dickie Douglas, the trapper, reaching gently for Miss Moss to assist her down the steps of the store after they had tiptoed back toward warm after that cold moment on the mountain. And there is Louis nuzzling his newborn twin sons, the two of them with enormous noses and feet and otherwise seemingly built of thin brown sticks so far. And there is the unabled lady with her hands cupped like a bowl in her lap, and Maria's hands cupped inside her hands, and the finch burbling while standing in the double bowl of their 20 fingers. And there is Emma Jackson and the morning waitress holding hands as they pick their way along a creek looking for first thimbleberries, but also scouting for, as Emma says, secret huckleberry havens and refuges. And there's a bobcat mother cuffing her sons, and a kestrel father ever so gently handing the large intestine of a vole to his daughters. And there's Mr. Shapiro scratching the dog who appeared last night on his porch and knocked on the door for admittance, and curled up in Mr. Shapiro's favorite reading chair as if he had been doing so for years. And there is Cosmos on his knees, smoothing out the soil over the graves of Mr. and Mrs. Robinson, as he plants tomatoes and beans and garlic because he knows they would have wanted to be working and productive even after their expiration dates. And there are Moon's parents dancing very slowly in the kitchen as the milk for their coffee boils over quietly, but they don't care. And Moon comes in and sees them and steps back, abashed and embarrassed. But then, for some reason he could never explain, he steps forward and wraps his arms as long as a story around both his parents. And there is a delicious brief moment before Moon's mother says, "Oh my God, the milk." Listen, this dog on Mr. Shapiro's reading chair. Let's take a minute and listen to his story, because it's an amazing story, and you hardly ever hear a story like his. This dog was born in a breeding shed on a farm that didn't farm anything anymore except puppies. The biggest, cutest ones were sold, and the runty, awkward ones were thrown out of a speeding pickup truck in the deep woods, where they would live for a few days and then become meat. The dog on Mr. Shapiro's chair had been a runty, awkward one who also annoyed the breeder by having the wrong father, by accident. When the dog was 2 months old, he was thrown out of a pickup truck as it sped through the deep woods. This was near a mountain the old people called Luatlakla, the Fire Mountain. In the old days, the mountain called Wyeast, where Dave and his family lived, was in love with the mountain called Luatlatkla, where the puppy landed in a mat of ferns and lay unconscious for a few minutes. But their love affair didn't work out, although the two mountains still gaze at each other across a huge river and dream of what still might happen. The dog awoke after a while and limped to a creek and drank and took stock of the situation. Luckily, this happened in late spring, so there were lots of small newly born creatures to find and eat, and as his first summer wore on, he learned how to lie in wait for rabbits along their runs, and how to wait patiently for squirrels to venture to earth. Here and there he found dead things that were good to eat, like once a buck deer gut shot by a hunter and abandoned in a thicket, and then in the fall he discovered a small river with a healthy salmon run. By winter he was twice as large as he had been when he was thrown out the window of his truck. The winter, though, that almost killed him. Several times he was so desperately hungry that he ate bark, and he lost a fang in a brief savage fight with a cougar over a deer carcass, and once when he fought a coyote for a rabbit he was slashed so badly across the chest that he nearly bled to death, although he killed and ate the coyote who slashed him, which may have been just the meat that saved his life. By the next spring he was gaunt but alive, and he enjoyed another 3 seasons of hunting, the only terrifying moment being an encounter with a bear. When the snow melted in May, he began to travel. At first, he followed the remote logging road from which he had been thrown as a puppy. Then he followed a county road that descended the mountain slowly, and then he found himself in a wide valley of farms and ranches and orchards and vineyards. Had he known he was less than a mile from the puppy mill where he was born, and had he the slightest urge for vengeance, he might have paused there and wreaked silent havoc, for the man who threw him from the truck kept chickens and ducks and geese. But his nature was peaceful, and he went on. He did not know his destination, but he knew his direction, straight south. He traveled by night to avoid human beings and their cars. He ate as he went, catching squirrels and birds who had never encountered a dog so fast and deadly. He grazed here and there in fields and orchards, developing a lifelong taste for wine grapes and carrots. The one time he felt flummoxed by a tremendous river far too wide to swim, he soon found a highway bridge and crossed so early in the morning, in such a dim mist that the only driver who saw him assumed that he was a whopping large coyote, which he reported to his fellow workers at the airport, who didn't believe him as usual. That crazy Henry Hutto, always making stuff up, they said. But for once they were wrong, and Henry Hutto was essentially right. Still south, but now slowly up the gentle slopes of another mountain, through industrial wasteland and suburban villas, through schoolyards and playgrounds, across the campus of a community college, always up toward the glacial air, he could smell like a new home, always avoiding trucks of any kind, always avoiding human beings, always moving at night and napping during the day, being seen only once when he caught and ate an arrogant cat in a yard right in front of a 4-year-old boy who watched with interest, and finally to Mr. Shapiro's door at night and wearily into the reading chair. There are so many ways we could close this chapter of the dog's story for a moment before coming back to him later, but let's stop right here with Mr. Shapiro on the couch staring at the dog, and the dog in Mr. Shapiro's reading chair staring at Mr. Shapiro, the two of them puzzled and delighted at having met each other at last.